right. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's discussion on optimizing the building management, with a life cycle approach. My name is Colette Temming. I'm COO of Lessons Commercial Division, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's panel. Before I begin, I'd like to remind the audience that we are recording today's session, and please feel free to submit questions in the chat view. We'll also have some poll questions where we will ask for audience participation. So please feel free to actually include your comments in the chat view as well, along with your questions, and hopefully we'll have a lively discussion today. So with that, I would like to turn it over to the panelists to introduce yourselves. Ted, if you could start.
Sure. Thanks, Colette. Ted Ritter with Alumni 360, co-chair of the IT community of IFMA based in Phoenix, Arizona. And really looking forward to this discussion today.
Susan. Great. Hey, everyone. Fantastic to be here. Looking forward to the discussion. I'm Susan. I'm part of the Autodesk Global Strategy team. And within my role, I've got a focus on building operations and facilities management.
Nick.
Hey, also very happy to be here today and participating in this panel conversation. Nick Stefanodakis. I am a VP of Strategic Alliances and Channel at Eptora. And one of my main focuses is on our strategic alliance with Autodesk around the building lifecycle approach that we'll be talking about today. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Perfect. And Ed.
Hi, thank you. Ed Novak, Senior Facilities Project Manager with Delta Dental Insurance Company. Just exploring and really enjoying getting into the subject. So looking forward to hearing more. Thanks.
Terrific. So why don't we start, maybe Ted, if you can give a quick introduction on ITC and IFMA.
Absolutely. The IT community of IFMA is actually the oldest counselor community. We've gone through 3 name changes since 1989, which is astounding that been around that long. I guess people have always needed technology. Really, at the cost of what we do is we try to answer the question, how does technology support corporate real estate and facility management? What's been really enjoyable about this evolution is the technology changes about every 3 months. So we always have quite a bit to talk about. We love collaborating. We love sharing best practices, case studies. One of the things that happened to our community during the pandemic is we actually grew. We didn't just grow in numbers in North America, we grew around the world. I think people realized that it was really important to adopt the best solutions possible to deal with what was going on during the pandemic and then into the advent of hybrid work. And I think we saw a lot of innovation in a very short amount of time. So thanks to all our members. Many thanks to our sponsors, of which Autodesk is certainly one. We do support the IFMA Foundation as well as regional events. We just have one in Dallas. We've got one coming up in Chicago. And I think, trying to connect our knowledge base and our subject matter experts with local chapters, as well as collaborating with other communities and councils, is a very dynamic thing for us. With that, I have a question for Susan. Why did we do this? I mean, you reached out last year and said, I have this idea.
Yeah, that's right. So last year, Autodesk reached out to the IFMA IT community with kind of a new idea around running some new research. And really, the intent of this research, which is around the topic of the building life cycle, is we wanted to create a bit of a rally cry across the industry to say, now is the time for better data sharing, better collaboration across all phases of the building life cycle. I'm sure as many of us on today's call know that the building value chain is often broken, and we often lose a huge amount of data from design to operations. And in fact, often operations people don't always trust the data that they receive after that design and construction process. So we really felt that now was a good time to revisit this theme around taking a life cycle approach. In fact, we see this topic getting more momentum naturally across the industry. So we thought it was a good opportunity to revisit this with a bit of a fresh perspective.
Terrific. So there's a lot of discussion around life cycle. Susan, how would you, I guess, let the audience know or describe what life cycle means as part of this report and as part of your efforts at Autodesk?
So for me, when I think about the life cycle, a life cycle approach, I'm really thinking there about considering and connecting phases of the building across people, process, and technology. So the topic relates to BIM for FM, but actually it's much broader than that. So for me, actually, collaboration is a big part of this. We do need more connections across the architects, engineers, and operators. And as we'll get into today, unfortunately, facility managers are often not brought into processes early enough. So ultimately, it's about this kind of more connected way of managing a building. And ultimately, there's opportunities for more efficiency in terms of managing buildings. In fact, in a similar way to what's happened in the automotive sector, we can actually make cars more cost effectively when we bring together the designers, the manufacturers, and the supply chain. So that's really personally kind of how I think of this topic.
Perfect. And you bring up a great point, and it was also in the report. And one that I found interesting when I was reading the report was 95% of the data generated during construction goes unused, right? And that's higher than I anticipated initially. And that continues to show through in this struggle between the siloed data and different data formats. And, how do we pull that information through all the way through to the life cycle? So let me turn to the panelists, and maybe Nick, we can start with you. From your perspective, what were kind of some of the key findings or aha moments of this report?
Yeah, well, you touched on one already with the 95% of data going unused. We talk about data loss on each step of the journey in these workflows, from planning to architecture to engineering, construction, and then ultimately into commissioning and handover. But to see it that 95% of the data goes unused was pretty striking, I guess. So that was one. As we know, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but a lot of the life cycle costs don't happen during construction. It all happens during the full life cycle of the building in operations, and decisions that are made early on in the process can have a dramatic impact on those costs through that life cycle. So, again, bringing the stakeholders to the table. Those are some of the key findings that struck me. Again, the impact of involving operations early on in the long-term cost impact of a facility. Those were some of the key takeaways for me on the report.
Ted, how about you?
The 95% certainly shocked me. I expected more like 75%. So I mean, it's what I thought it was. I think looking at the willingness of certain projects and certain organizations to involve operations, and others to just steamroll and say, "Hey, we're done. Here's your handover plan, and good luck." Susan had mentioned that there's a lack of trust between operations. It's like, well, you gave me a version of the plans from 6 months ago. There were 14 change orders, and you didn't actually give me as-built, so I have to go check everything anyway. It, you know, I think my biggest takeaway was this is not just about the data. This is about people. This is about process, about communication. I mean, obviously the data needs to be aligned, and we need to be able to hand off to operations the data elements they really find useful. But this all starts with people and process.
Perfect. And Ed, how about you?
Well, yeah, I agree with what you all are saying, but the one thing that kind of surprised me is that it said that only 12% was the average wasted time because of fragmented data. That seems too low to me. I think most organizations have multiple systems to support their facilities, whether it's financial, asset management, BMS, CMMS, IWMS. There's a lot of systems out there, let alone the design system or the model that it's coming from. And my experience is trying to find not just the data, but what is the right data, right? What's the most current data? What's the source of truth? So I think that number to me seemed a little bit low.
Terrific. Well, I'm going to stay with you just on that point, right? As part of the report, it said 67% of FMs or facility managers plan to invest in real-time data solutions over the next 12 months. So before they begin this journey, what advice or lessons learned would you give just from your own experience?
So you're asking me?
I am.
Oh, okay, great. I'd say just start getting into it. For me, I'm late to the table here, but it's never too late. So in other words, we started a project, we started the planning and design last spring, and I didn't have this aha moment until September, and going to World Workplace in Denver and meeting people like Ted and Susan, and discovering more about what's out there in terms of building information. So by then we were all set to submit for permit, but I would have done things differently. I would have put together a plan, and I would have looked at who are my resources, what are my data sources, what am I trying to do here, what's my goal with this data. But I was already into the project, and I decided I'm just going to jump right into it. And so I would encourage other FMs like myself to just start exploring. Do you already have building information models that you can learn from? And you can get access to those models easily and quickly. I don't want to necessarily just plug Autodesk, but the Tandem product, you can sign up for free, and you can look at your models, and you can try to understand how the data was structured and what data is in there. But also you need to look at your other systems, right? What's your CMMS system, BMS? How does data exchange between those systems? How will you exchange data? Where is this data going to reside ultimately? So I'm still exploring this. Like I said, I'm only 5 months into this, but I feel confident that this year we're going to have a better system for project handover. We're going to have the ability to have systems talk to each other. Are we going to get to a digital twin ultimately? I hope so. But again, my focus is on making sure that as we complete our projects this year, we have a better handover process, and that we are transferring the data that we need to in order to better maintain our facilities.
Yeah, it's a great point, right? We can stop saying the data is only as good as the day you handed it to me, right? But it'll actually continue on and through those systems. Great point. You know, Ted, you have a great perspective across the industry. From your perspective, what are some of the challenges that you've seen?
Trust, communication, and you know, the fundamentals is to get all this to work. It's not just saying this is what we need, but it's rolling up, you know, kind of the sleeves, sitting down and creating a real data dictionary that works for everyone. You know, Ed was just talking about you need to look at all your systems and mention Tandem. Without that data dictionary, you can't get your systems to talk to each other. I think, you know, the fundamental blocking and tackling of that's super important.
Yeah, and I think you probably just answered our first question in the chat, which is really, you know, what's the workflow, the smart workflow that, you know, people need to accept and be ready for it to achieve, right? When it goes from design to the handover stage, and you're really saying that those documented processes and kind of that Bible helps.
Absolutely. You know, it's process, it's open communication, but it's also making sure that when you know, do that data integration, do that data handoff, that the receiving system actually can make sense of it.
Terrific. Any examples that you can think of, Ted, from an industry perspective
That have worked or not worked?
that have worked?
Okay, I'm just checking. We, as IT community members, were able to sort of in real time follow the progress of not the most recent, but one gen down renovation construction project at Denver Airport. It was a lot of meetings. It was a lot of meetings to get down to what were the respective data sources of truth, what were the right connection points between all the players. So it is a functioning airport, they're building a conference hotel, and they're renovating part of the common area all at the same time. They were also doing an upgrade to their jetways. The first example of something that worked really well was the jetway use case. It's probably one of the most highest value components of any given airport. The jetways don't work, the planes can't get boarded, can't take off, and the airport gets no fees from the airline. Being able to map, after many meetings and some tests, being able to map data from the BIM model into their CMMS solution in real time was pretty amazing. I remember being in that meeting, one of the ones I got to go to live, but it's like, this can work. And that basic process set and that proof of concept based on one jetway was the baseline for the rest of the project success.
Terrific. So, you know, we talked about this concept of the data going beyond just the handover, right, that happens between construction and then operations. But, you know, Nick, from your perspective, how do we get to this, you know, digital twin, or where do we start when we look at digital twin? Because that will enable that data to continue to provide value to the FM all the way through the life cycle.
Yeah, and you know, I think what both Ed and Ted were just talking about is a key piece of that. It's that beginning with the end in mind. I did a talk at Autodesk University 2 years ago on a very similar topic, and one of the as I was doing some research and looking at some projects that we've been involved in and with our company and our technology, one of the was a bank in, I think it was Prague. One of the quotes that struck me from that was, an educated owner is far more likely to get value from BIM and asset deliverables. So it's really about really understanding why are we doing this? Why are we implementing something like this? And what data do we need? Why do we need the data? What data do we need? And then how are we going to validate and maintain that data? Those are really key questions that we need to be asking. And as Ted said on the example with the airport, you know, there's a lot of data that might exist in the model. It's not all going to be relevant for what you need in a CMMS or in operations. So of all of that complex data and model information, what is really important to ongoing operations? And what are the attributes that we need of that information to really run a efficient maintenance program around those assets? What information is available? And, you know, and it goes back again to engaging the right stakeholders early on in the process, the people that are actually going to maintain it, because if we don't put things into the contracts or requirements up front about what information we need to be added during the design and construction and commissioning phases, that we won't get the data that we actually need in operation. So, really starting that process early on, involving the key stakeholders, thinking through and beginning again with that end in mind of what we need and making sure that we incorporate that all the way upstream into the process. And that to me is kind of fundamental, whether we're just doing BIM to FM or, to your point of your question, we want to eventually have a digital twin. There's those sort of foundational components that I think are really important in that overall process.
I mean, you make a great point. I think it ties back to the report, right? When you approach the management of this from a life cycle perspective, right? It enables you to manage the building systems much more efficiently. You can, support your sustainability goals, and you can make better strategic decisions, right? With that information and that data. As an industry, I think we've all seen some of the statistics, right? Of folks leaving the industry or retiring, and we as an industry, when we don't have that same level of talent coming into the industry, how do we do things more efficiently and with data and information and technology? And I think that goes back to how do we continue to work and collaborate with other parts of the organization, if you're in corporate real estate or if you're just in property management. But what are some of the best practices, Ted, that you're seeing on the collaboration amongst these different groups collectively to help bring that data to life?
It starts with a cup of coffee. Sometimes it starts with a beer. Sometimes it starts with a couple of beers. You've got to develop those key relationships with the other departments that have, care and custody of their respective systems of truth. I think it's as simple as reaching out in terms of setting up regular cadence, whether that's, actively during a project or even if it's not. Things change, they change every week in facilities. So, keeping that line of communication, if there's an active project going on, setting up what that schedule is, which might be, quite frequent. If there's no active projects, adjusting the schedule will be, maybe down to, hey, everything's okay, let's get together once a quarter. It's really as simple as that. Process maintenance, the best practice is document it. People change jobs. If you lose a key stakeholder to another organization or they retire, who's going to bring that replacement up to speed on what's been established? I think that's also really important.
Susan, how about you? I mean, working with different organizations.
Yeah, I'll just add on a few things that I've observed in terms of best practice and actually some innovative approaches as well. So I think for me, meeting our customers and the ones that have really cracked this, there does seem to be two common themes. So one, we've spoken about stakeholder collaboration. There is that really early on discussion and engagement between architectural roles and facility manager roles. And in particular, I've seen great examples in the university sector where these departments have come together and worked very closely. So I think we've all kind of spoken about that as a best practice step. I think as well, it's almost kind of potentially rethinking how things have traditionally been done. We've seen some really interesting examples recently of firms starting to populate their CMMS while a project is still getting developed. So historically, we've often kind of completed a project, there's a data package, it gets handed over, thrown over the wall, and then you're trying to work out what data you need, where the data is, what format it's in. And then sometimes you end up recreating the data for your maintenance system. But I think it's interesting, some examples. There's actually some of the shared customers that we have with Eptura have started looking at bringing that process forward and actually kind of making better use of the data that gets produced through the AEC process. So I think that's interesting approach, and if possible, definitely something you could consider doing.
Yeah, it's great advice. Nick, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think Susan touched upon a lot of it. You know, one of the things that came out of the report that I thought was interesting was that there seems to be a growing trend of more engagement with facilities managers already. You know, I think there was a 70% of facility managers predict a more collaboration with designers. So I think maybe that's an indication that we're starting to see it take hold. But, you know, again, I think it's like Ted said, you know, I think you just need to do it. And if you're the facility manager that is going to be ultimately taking on a project after it's built, inject yourself into that process one way or another, whether it's a coffee or a beer, as Ted said, or something different. But just in general, I think the relationships between the organizations and the collaboration is increasing, not just around facilities and asset and some of the traditional things that we're seeing, but in this post-COVID era around space and the optimization of space and the relationships that facilities, space planning, HR, IT, security, all these organizations, you know, really are leaning on each other for the data that they need to figure out what kind of space they need to, and really, or the services that they need and the volume of services that they need to provide on which days of the week are important. You know, we still have this midweek mountain, which creates additional work orders during the middle of the week versus the ends of the week. So there's a lot more collaboration, I think, that's happening, and these teams working together to really manage a facility in this post-COVID era. So I think we're starting to see a lot more of that, and we are in our space. But it's encouraging to see the trends from the report.
Sure. And Ed, you actually live this right across your organization and working with the different departments. Any advice for the audience?
Yeah, so I think, as I had mentioned, you know, understand what your goals are, and maybe look at this how I'm looking at it, which is take some small steps first, and look at trying to just see what it takes to connect the data. So for me, I'm really focused on handover and getting information over to our facility maintenance team. We outsource that to an outsource company. So I want to make sure that it works with their system, that on day one, which is coming up in less than 2 months, they've got the information and ready to maintain our facilities. But like I said before, so that's one thing, is just understand what your goals are. What information is it that you're trying to extract from your design and construction models? But also, in the future, what I would do is really look at who are the resources that you're going to be working with for future projects. So what I discovered, first of all, like I said, we were 6 months into this project before I got this aha moment. Wouldn't this be nice? So we didn't even know we wanted any kind of BIM, and it kind of took our architect by surprise when I asked for it, and it actually took 3 months to get it. It wasn't that they didn't want to give it to us, it's just that no one had ever asked them for it. So you have to expect that kind of thing if you don't make that a requirement, or let your design team know up front, this is what you're planning on doing with this data. We've been using this design firm for years, and they've been using Revit for years, but we'd never asked them for this data before. So that's one thing. And the other is, look at what's going to be in the model, because what we found out is that not all the engineering firms subscribe to the model. They're doing things differently. Okay, I'll use the AutoCAD, which is a great tool. I've been using AutoCAD for 30 years, and I'm still struggling trying to figure out how to get HVAC AutoCAD data into my model and into my CMMS. So you got to think about those things ahead of time. If your mechanical systems are an important thing that you want to capture and maintain, and I believe that for most facility managers, that's pretty important. You need to look at where is that data coming from, and how easily can you get that data across to ultimately where you need it to go.
You know, it's an interesting point, right? As an industry, we're moving kind of from intuition to operational insights driven by information. And your point around getting the information from BIM, although BIM's been around, since the 70s, we as an industry, facility managers, don't inherently pull that information from BIM. Some of that based on IT and technology and you know, what do we do with that information? But it suggests the skills are going to need to change for our industry as well, as we start to manage more of these systems and get more and more insight into that and bring more people into the industry. From that perspective, Ted, do you think this is going to be an easy transition for our industry?
It's a gradual transition. I think there's, you know, we all resist change a little bit. You know, we're changing things at multiple levels on how stuff gets done. We are seeing progress. Remember working on a project with GSA in I think 2015, which is, you know, technology matters, and really looking at the importance of bringing all stakeholders together at the beginning. Have we come a long way in the last 8 years? For sure. Do we have a ways to go? Absolutely. How do we feel about a poll?
Perfect. Hopefully everyone can read the poll, but it's, do you support or request specific electronic delivery of construction documents to support facilities management? And the second question is FM operations included in the design and construction process within your organization?
Good to see that we're
Everybody
getting
another
some questions as well.
Why don't we, I guess, you know, Susan and Nick, from your perspective, you know, Ed's probably, you know, out on the leading edge of some of the things that he's doing from an industry perspective. But how do you advise your clients as well to kind of make this shift with the talent and the knowledge that they have in their organization? And what are some of the things that they can do to ensure their success?
Sure, yeah, I can maybe pick up initially and then hand over to Nick. So I guess what we're talking about can seem quite daunting, and we certainly do recognize that. So a lot of our work with customers, we often advise them to start somewhere. So kind of take a small part of your portfolio and test out this kind of more consolidated view of data from your models, your different files. So it's really that start somewhere concept that we very much push. We also actually try to, where we can, facilitate our customers to meet each other. So we have a number of customer communities, some for the education sector and various other ones. And we always find kind of connecting customers together, there are different maturities, is very effective as well, because they can kind of learn firsthand from each other in terms of what works and what hasn't worked.
Good point. Nick, anything from your?
Yeah, thanks. I think one of the things we touched on it a little bit is, you know, these kinds of projects are a great time to take a step back and look at our standards. I think, Susan, you mentioned earlier about the connection between BIM and a CMMS. You know, in an ideal world, during these processes, we're reviewing our standards, and if you get your standards, whether it's in a space management system or in a CMMS system, really aligned and organization wide, then that transition into the requirements that you want for your next project, or when you show up at those conversations, from the facility perspective, you're coming with lots of data based on the way that you're operating your facilities, your space today, so you can bring value to those conversations. And Susan's absolutely right. Like nobody's doing this across their entire portfolio at once. So starting small is definitely a key piece of this, and having success, getting that early success in an initial project. Learn everything that we can on that, leverage the data that we have today available from how we're managing buildings and facilities today, and try to inform those upstream processes with that data to really, again, get everybody engaged around what the actual outcomes are.
I guess it brings us to one of the questions that's in the Q&A, which is how easily is this data transferred between systems, right? Between your BIM and your CMMS software.
Maybe I'll take a stab at that, and then ask anybody that wants to join in. But a couple of ways to look at that. For one, the software doesn't perform magic. That in the integrations between a BIM and a CMMS, and that's why knowing what you want up front and ensuring that data is prepared in a way that's consumable after or during handover, during that workflow, all the way to operations, that is a key component. I will say, if you think about a traditional model, there's they're federated models, lots of different. There's a mechanical, there's electrical, there's structural, all these different models coming together, and typical customers might not have the experience to bring all of that together. So there's a lot of work that's involved in really preparing an as maintained model that can be used for operations after handover. There's a lot of work that goes into that. I love all of the really cool things you can do with a digital twin in terms of visualization and analytics, but one of the key things that I'm really positive about with digital twins, and in particular the work that Autodesk is doing with Tandem, is that it takes on a lot of that heavy lifting of bringing those models together to a consumable format that folks like us on the CMMS space management can really take advantage of that data and keep things in sync bidirectionally. So again, there's no easy answers, but the tools are getting better, the technology is getting better, the industry is getting smarter around those workflows, and then obviously there's a bit of discipline that's required at both the customers and the vendors.
Great point. Our next question is, how do you get the attention of the C-level in finance? I think Dean probably said it best, right? There needs to be this collaboration between AEC or the construction and the FM relative to the building lifecycle management, right? Because construction, architectural and engineering own the project for 18 to 36 months, but yet operations continues to manage that asset for the next 75 to 100 years. And I think this chart displays that very well, right? A majority of those costs are in that kind of management phase of operations. And how do you really gain the benefit of what you're doing up front that will last you all the way through the kind of the operations and life cycle. And that's a great financial benefit to the organization. In addition, I think you're going to see more and more information relative to space planning. But separate from these operations, are any of you seeing kind of the data that's coming over from BIM that's helping for the space planning and the occupant experience, the people that are in the building, and how that information is being used?
Sure, I can maybe take a first go at that. In fact, this was one of the questions part of our survey. We kind of asked a group of 200 respondents and said, how do you use data from the AEC process in facilities management. And really at the top of the list were use cases around asset management and maintenance management. So having a clear view of what assets you have, where they are spatially located within your building does appear to be the top use case. And then I think we saw with our survey as well, kind of secondary to that are use cases around space management and space planning. So taking some of the existing data around spatial dimensions and using that throughout the building life cycle to keep informing how you kind of plan and optimize your spaces. So I think we're seeing those are the two core use cases. It'd be really interesting as we look forward around sustainability as well to kind of see how some of this data is starting to inform those strategies too.
Terrific. One of our next questions from the audience is, are there any case studies that show success of a great handover, right, of technology solutions showing these amazing results? So any great handovers or technology solutions?
Yeah, there are a few out there that we've seen. Just, mention a few. The example from the Denver airport is available online. It is real. It really did happen. And it was not just a handover. It was maybe a step beyond, which is, in real time, how do you do this during course of construction? How do you look at what your expectations are on a monthly basis? Anyone else want to add a positive spin on a case study?
The one I referenced earlier was, I believe it was CSOB Bank in, I think it was the Czech Republic, in their handover process. And they invested the time up front to really understand the problem before engaging into their requirements. Another one, just as a value of using BIM in conjunction with operations, was UC Health, which we've referenced a number of times, where they increased their ability to maintain their space data by moving from 2D CAD to a BIM-based space management program that's integrated with their space management solution. And it really reduced the amount of time and the people that they needed to update their space data, to generate the reports that they needed to for CMS or Joint Commission. And it really was I think it was about a 50% time savings for them over the course of a year.
A great example. I think the next question is probably for you, Susan. Does Autodesk have a list of CMMS vendors that integrate with their products? AutoCAD, Inventor, Revit, etc.
Yeah, so actually there is, I believe, a broad-ish set of CMMS firms that have built integrations to Autodesk products. So we have a whole developer community that's been in existence for decades and decades. So there is a broad number of them. I guess in terms of firms where we're spending some extra time to enable a really smooth integration. So that would be Eptura. We formed this kind of strategic partnership a couple of years ago, and it's really all focused around trying to kind of ease the flow of data kind of bi-directionally from your design products and your maintenance products. But yeah, there are kind of a broad range of options out there.
The next question really, I guess, combines two questions, but one was really, who's the best advocate for breaking down the silos? And the second one is, who's best to engage the stakeholders and FM folks early on? So it really goes into kind of the collaboration around the data silos, but who from your perspective do you think should lead this effort in an organization going forward? And how do they engage others? And Ed, you probably, since you've lived this in your own organization, I think it sounds like you were the advocate that kind of pulled the other stakeholders together, but how did that happen from your perspective?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, especially in this day and age when so much of the maintenance and operations has been outsourced, they've got their own systems, and they're not even really thinking about design And so I think it really is the role of the facility project manager to pull those resources together and make sure that people understand the goals of the project and be able to support the effort to transfer the data across, but also looking at it from, maybe a larger, longer term goal, which is what I'm still thinking about, which is, ultimately, where am I going with this data? Is this going to reside in a BIM, and is that going to be my central source of data, and then CMMS and other systems tie into that? What is that workflow, that data flow going to look like between systems? Because we have probably 4 or 5 systems, and we're not that huge of a company. I can't imagine, larger companies with much larger portfolios with different types of businesses and divisions. It can be very daunting. So again, my recommendation is just start small. And if you've already got projects, if your architects have already done a BIM for one of your past projects, start reaching out to them and start exploring what that looks like, and start looking at your data. How does the data get into these other systems? I'm interested, initially with our CMMS, but I'm also interested in building management systems, our security system, because right now we get feeds between our IWMS and our security systems to understand employee presence data. We're diving deeper into that. Sensors, we may be going that route, but it may be just that we go deeper in more detail into the data points for employee presence. And so how does that tie in? So you have a living dynamic data out there, and where does that reside? So is that something that, as a facility manager, your company, your enterprise, are you going to host this? Are you going to have someone else host this for you? And don't forget to get your IT team involved early, because they may have some concerns about, what data is out there, who's accessing it, how secure is it? So you got to think about that. There's a lot of stakeholders involved and a lot of people you have to start reaching out to. But again, I would just start with talk to your design team and find out what do they have. And it really shouldn't take that much time and cost that much money in order to get your first mile across, and start looking at that, and start again looking at the data of your other systems. And it's really become much easier in my experience. Like this research paper, I did a research paper last fall looking at this whole process of data exchange, and it's become a lot easier to do that than it was, say, 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago. So the time to start really is now, I think, because this is going to be the future, and it's going to be a huge benefit for all aspects of facilities management.
Yeah, I think you're right. The report even kind of analyzes these trends and kind of presents these practical recommendations to empower facility managers that can play a key role in their organization. When we look towards the future, right? All of you are kind of on the leading edge of this. What do you predict is going to happen in this area over the next 3 to 4 years? Why don't we start with you, Ted?
As we stabilize the connections between departments, working groups, our partners outside the organization, I think we're going to see significant enhancements possible because of AI, optimizing analytics, being able to kind of lay in the pipe and do some error checking for us. We're not there yet, but I think it's coming. I think from some of the things at AU and how that's going to impact the design process will, I think, make some of the design data more accessible, even more accessible to operations. So that's what I think is going to happen.
Nick, how about you?
Yeah, I think Ted, you touched on. I think AI is going to be one of the biggest trends that we're going to see based on more of this real-time data, whether it's simple occupancy data or it's building systems data, collaboration data from sources like Microsoft, really bringing all that information together and using that to have more intelligence into the decisions that we're making, and even moving more towards automation. So buildings getting smarter, space planners and employees having better experiences based on the data and recommendation suggestions from the system and how they interact with it. So I think that's really where it's an area we're certainly investing and focusing on. I know Autodesk is as well, and I think we're really seeing the industry kind of move in that AI data-driven world.
How about you, Susan?
I think for me, one of the big themes that we're currently on the cusp of in terms of the technology space is around more convergences across different types of technology. So we've spoken today a lot about BIM to CMMS, but I think it's a broader theme. I think we're going to see more connections with other platforms like GIS. We're already seeing kind of more intake of data kind of from sensors, but I can kind of see a future where more data converges together, whether it's, I don't know, from a drone, kind of more data from people coming in. So I think that's an exciting future to look forward to, trying to kind of break down some of these significant data silos that we all face.
It's almost a life cycle of individual, right? From the morning all the way through to the end of the day, right? How they use space, how they get to the office.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about you, Ed?
Yeah, I agree that, I think things are going to become more centralized and more connected. And as you just stated, I think more companies are going to want to understand not only who's coming into their facilities and when they're coming into their facilities, but why are they coming into the facilities? And I think that's where more of this data and intelligence and integrating and getting better analytics is going to help the facility manager understand what they need to do and how they need to manage their facilities.
Great point. And I know we're running down to the last few minutes, so I wanted to give the panelists kind of the opportunity to kind of share any final thoughts on this topic or any final advice for, again, some of the folks that are just starting on this journey.
Yeah, can I just start? If you want to go to the next
please.
slide. I would say, again, just jump right into it. Maybe it's the deep end, maybe it's not, but you gotta start somewhere if you haven't. And I admit that 6 months ago I had no idea how to get started on this, and I just started doing some research. And I think this community is a great way to get some help. And I think we need to do more in terms of if you're new at this, if you're interested in getting started, we need to help each other out. And I'm more than happy to assist if people want to reach out to me. Again, I'm only like 5 or 6 months into this, but I find this to be a really fascinating area of facilities management, and I'm dedicated to, and I've got the support of my management to continue to explore this. And I just think it's a fascinating journey. And if you haven't started already, I think the community here can help you get started.
That's a great point, right? Collaborate with the other folks in the industry and learn from them and share. And IFMA is a great resource to start.
Yes.
How about Nick or Susan? Kind of your last minute thoughts?
Susan, you want to go?
Yeah, I think maybe just paraphrasing some of the wise words of Ed around start somewhere. It is a daunting change that we're talking about. So kind of finding the kind of bite-sized projects and initiatives taking place. There's a lot of renovation happening in buildings at the moment, and that could be a good smaller piece to kick off with.
Yeah, I think both did a really good job of kind of summarizing it. I think the idea of, just starting small, define what problem you initially want to try and solve, and then think how you might solve that problem leveraging BIM, digital twins data, and then what, back into from that, what's really needed upstream to support that. And you're a really rich source of data in facilities to inform those projects, those renovation projects that Susan talked about. So, advertise the data that you have and can make available to support those upstream design decisions that are being made.
It's a great point. How about you, Ted?
So think about, IFMA is a great resource, within the IFMA world. The Knowledge Library, I think, has over 250 articles, past presentations as it relates to FM technology. The IT community, IT.ifma.org resource page has about another 50 beyond that. There's a lot out there, but take advantage of other webinars. And if you're at conferences, find people to talk to, like Ed, that Susan was lucky enough to meet at World Workplace in Denver and say, we're kind of on the same path here. How do we learn from each other? We have time, I think, for one more quick poll, and then we're at
Great.
the hour. I think there's a poll coming.
There we go.
We can't take the poll because we can't.
That's true. This final poll is really, would you like more information from the IT community of IFMA and events? Would you like more information on the Autodesk solutions or up to our solutions? So.
And just to repeat, everyone that registered will get a link to the recording as well as a copy of the deck and a link to the research paper. So have no fear. We'll stay in touch that way. Yeah,
and just to recap, I think Ed said it best. What are you solving for? Looking at really scalable kind of projects, right? What makes the most sense to start small, utilize industry resources that are available to you, in addition to some of the tools that are available in the industry. And they're certainly getting a lot more advanced in terms of integrating data from one system to the other, so you can achieve that life cycle approach going forward. So we'll give everybody just a minute more, and then we'll go ahead and post the results. Just to recap again, there's a link in the chat to the report, so you'll be able to capture that. Please feel free to reach out to any of the panelists through LinkedIn or IFMA if you have further questions or seeking some advice. So, I don't know, Alex, if you're able to post the results of the survey, terrific. So yes, people want to engage more, and they'd like to have more information, which is terrific. And hopefully they can share their experience as well. So I can't thank the panelists enough. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your thoughts and sharing your experience with the industry. It is greatly appreciated. And thank you all for participating in this event, and good luck on your journey as you start to look at the life cycle approach within your own organizations. So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.